Hey, what's up, family? This is Doug Reed with the Let's Go Show. Oh my God, I'm nervous about this because I have an award winning actress, Madison McGregor. How are you, Madison?
Great, thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, of course, I thank you for actually, coming on the Let's Go Show, and we have so much to talk about, and we just, I guess say we just gonna jump right into it.
Awesome.
So, who is Madison McGregor?
Well, if we look into the past of Madison McGregor, we might get a sense of it. So I'll start there. So I think for me, I've lived a lot of life in 23 years. I think for for the average 23-year-old, I think.
Yeah.
So I was born with a health condition called cystic fibrosis, and it's a genetic condition that affects the lungs and digestive system. So I was born with that. It's And that was really hard. It was hard for me. It was hard for my family. I had a surgery at 1 day old, and from there, it's every 3 months going to the doctors. And I think for me, and it's hard for me to talk about even on this podcast because I'm just starting to recover from the trauma I experienced growing
Mm-hmm.
up and having to visit the hospital every 3 months and being told, you're not this enough, you're not that enough, something's wrong with you. And I think, that was hard. And at the same time, it built a lot of empathy for me for other people who have been discriminated against in some way. Because for me, I felt like as soon as someone found that out about me, there were a lot of assumptions. There was a sense that, oh, this is a disabled person. This is someone who isn't capable of normal things. And that really motivated me most of my life to just be able to prove people wrong that I am normal and I can do the things everyone wants. So when I was in grade 5, I won first from my school in a cross country competition, and my condition affects the lungs. So that's not really something people thought I was capable of. So I think for me, looking back, that was a huge motive to just prove people wrong and just be like, hey, you can't tell me what to do with my life.
Yeah, you know what? And actually, a real good friend of mine, and I have to be honest, through social media, I've gained a whole lot of friends. But I
Oh,
have a guy out in California. I'll say his name. His name is Lance Jasper. Lance Jasper suffers from sickle cell.
mm,
Um, and one thing, and you talked about it, being discriminated against, the disparity, especially within, I'll say even in the black community. What he does is educate people about sickle cell within the black
mm,
community.
wow.
But one thing he talks about as well is that discrimination. He talks about how people, even, and I'll ask you this, even as you learn more about your condition, did you even find yourself educating not only, family and friends, but maybe even the doctors or nurses when you had to go in? Did you find that happening?
Yeah, I think, with cystic fibrosis, a lot of my young life I spent educating people and companies. Like we would raise money for cystic fibrosis and research, and my family was a huge part of that. And it's interesting because for me, it was so when I was really young, I'd have to take digestive enzymes with my food. And so, in the sense of educating other people, I found that I had to educate my peers because they're like, why are you taking that? And it was a double edged sword because I had an opportunity to, raise awareness about this condition. And at the same time, I just wanted to be a normal kid and not have to deal with it. And as I got older, I got more informed on ways that I could change my lifestyle to make cystic fibrosis easier to live with, like diet or exercise adjustments to reduce the symptoms I was experiencing. And I did go through some hard times with the doctors, and it was more of an education on, I'm living in my body. So I know what it's like to live with the condition. They know what it's like from talking to patients and the research they do. And I had a bit of a crossroads with them because sometimes I'd say, hey, listen, like this is what feels right for me. So, for example, for cystic fibrosis patients, they're encouraged to have high fat foods because it's supposed to be hard to gain weight. And there have been studies that have shown the higher weight that a cystic fibrosis patient is, the higher the lung function and the better the quality of life. for me, I didn't like eating junk food. I was just one of those kids. I was very athletic. I really loved doing sports and dance and everything. And I just told him I don't want to eat fudgesicles and chips and burgers. I want to eat healthy foods. And that's what feels right to me. And I would get into these battles with the dietitian over my lifestyle choices. And I was like, listen, like, this isn't what feels good. And they're like, no, but we're right. It almost felt like, in Matilda, where that movie Matilda, I love that movie growing up. And they go, I'm smart, you're stupid. I'm right,
Yeah.
you're wrong. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that was kind of how I grew up, with this kind of, I had this kind of rebellion against authority in a way because of my experience with some doctors. And I'm not saying it's all doctors, but there were some, people that were consulting me that made me feel that way. And that was really hard because I was like an 8-year-old kid trying to deal with all these doctors and people telling me all these things. So yes, it's with regards to education, that was basically kind of what went down.
Yeah, and I would even think even the peer pressure around, like you said, you had to end up educating your friends and your peers, and then even with that, there's certain peer pressure that comes because you don't want to be looked at like the strange kid.
Yeah.
How did that affect you from a mental aspect?
Yeah, I was really lucky that kids for the most part didn't care. Like, we were so young that, they'd ask initially and then, okay, whatever. Cool. Let's just like play around. It's all good. And I also have a very visible scar on my stomach from the surgery when I was a day old. And when I was competitive dancing, that was something that I wasn't sure, because we'd wear crop tops and shorts. And everyone was so understanding. And I actually worked with a choreographer once, and he was like, that's badass. Like, that's really cool you have a scar. And so I had a lot of positivity that way. And at the same time, I think as I got older and I was starting to process what the scar meant and what taking the digestive enzymes meant, it meant that my pancreas didn't work properly. And having the scar meant I had to have this surgery at a day old. And I have this health condition. And I think that's when it started to take a toll on my mental health. And I started to realize the reality. Because when I was little, I was just like, oh, it's cool, I have a scar. That's a little different. And I had a friend, Erica Heller, she was one of my early, really close friends and mentors in life. And she had a scar in the same place. She had colon cancer, and she lost her battle with colon cancer when she was just 30. And that was really hard for me because she was like, I was being bullied. It was like a really rough year. Like, I was in grade 4. I was 9 years old, being bullied at school, had no friends. I was literally like something out of a movie, just like on my own, reading a book at recess. And Erica was the only person outside of my family that I felt safe with, that I felt truly understood me and had this health condition she was dealing with too. So it made me feel less alone. And then when I lost her, that really took a toll on my mental health too. So I think like bullying, having a health condition, and losing a really close friend all kind of made my mental health more challenging. And for me, how I dealt with that at a young age was just channeling all of the grief I went through into dance and into doing karate and into all the kind of activities I was doing at the time. And those were my coping mechanisms. And I'm not saying that looking back, I probably should have gone to therapy at that age, but I just wasn't aware of it. So
now you mentioned bullying too, which is I think over the course of the years has really come to a spotlight. And I'm just maybe a couple years older than you, I think.
Just a little bit.
But when I was coming up and the bullying was going on, nobody actually talked about it. And now even through social media, and well, I'm not saying social media, but just being online, people are being bullied like cyberly. What are your thoughts around bullying and the prevention of it, and then how we can actually keep educating, actually even not only just children but adults as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think it starts with communication, and I think we need to learn how to communicate with a bully and set boundaries, because I think that is a key. If I'm looking back, I think for me, my most empowered moments with bullies was when I learned how to talk back to them. And I grew up, like, disclaimer, I did not grow up I was just before cyberbullying era. So for me, like, I didn't experience cyberbullying. So I can't speak to that because I haven't experienced it. But I do know in person at school, that was what was really empowering. And at the same time, it's a very, very hard situation. So there was one time when I was bullied and I was able to change the situation around. And it was like a really close friend of mine. And I just basically said, listen, friends don't treat me. Friends don't treat each other the way you treat me. And we can't be friends anymore. And because you don't treat me right. And that went really well. I set boundaries with her and that totally changed. And then there's another time where there's like a group of girls who were bullying me, and I did everything I could to avoid conflict. I did everything I could to not engage with them and change the situation. And I just couldn't stop it. And it actually became physical as well. So I think that was at a point where my mom intervened in the school and she said, listen, like we need to protect her right now because they're starting to get physical with her. And so I think my advice would be with bullying is to have a trust, like find a trusted adult, talk to your parents about it. If you're being bullied, talk about it. Find someone you trust who can advocate for you if you don't have that power. Like get your support system and talk about it. Because for me, I didn't talk about it for a long time. And it was really bad. Like I would throw up before I went to school. I was like sick. Like and it took a while for my mom to clue in, like, oh, something's not right here. And she asked me like, what's going on? And I finally told her. So I think to prevent bullying and to change that situation, we need to talk about it. And I know it's so hard, but I think that's the most important thing is to just talk about it because then you
Yeah,
can get support.
yeah, and I was getting ready to ask you that, like, how difficult was that conversation to your
Mm,
mom and letting her
yeah.
know, and I know that had to be hard for her to, to
Yeah.
know that you
Yeah.
were going through that. I mean, because when we start talking about our kids and them being harmed, like we get harmed, and of course we gotta, we get
Yeah.
upset, and there's that defense mechanism. But how hard was that first conversation?
So hard. It was probably one of the hardest things I've done. And I think, yeah, I think it was just my mom, like, I think I was afraid to talk about it because I was afraid of the social consequences. And I think that's a lot of times why kids don't talk about it. You don't want to seem like a tattletale. You don't want to seem like, you ratted out your peers and get that kind of reputation and then get bullied for that. And coming from experience, that did not happen for me. Talking about it didn't turn me into a tattletale, and it didn't actually make things worse. It made things better because then those kids learned a lesson. The school handled it really well, and they kept it private. Nobody really knew. Anyone else in the school didn't know. It was just between the principal, me, and these kids, basically. And I think that's the right way to handle it.
Let me ask you. I guess I'm going kind of deep with the bullying because I
Yeah,
think
go for it.
I think this is so important.
Yeah,
If you had to, if there's some young person out there listening to this that has to have this conversation with their parents about
yeah.
bullying, how would you set that atmosphere?
Mm.
Because
Um,
I mean, because you mentioned before, and I say it all the time.
yeah.
Communication is one, but we have to feel safe, and there has to be a
Yes.
level of security to communicate our
Hmm.
feelings. We talked about
Yeah.
our good friend Dr. Alfie. What I learned, like
Yes.
your feelings are valid. How would
Hmm.
you set that atmosphere? What would that atmosphere look like if it had to be, if we could actually set a tone for that? What would the
Yeah.
atmosphere look like?
I think for me, the atmosphere that worked was just being in the car with my mom. It was just the two of us. So I think finding a time where it's just the two of you with a trusted person. And even if that's sometimes it's before bed and you just like, if you're a really young kid, mom or dad, tuck me in. I just need to talk to you about something. That's a great time. Just like safe, like you said, like safe moments at home, in the car, just like these little easy one-on-one moments where you're side by side on a walk together. So it doesn't feel as scary as just sitting face to face and being like, look, I'm bullied. I think it's a lot easier. And there's actually research done on this too, where if you're side by side, it's easier to talk about hard things. So I think finding that kind of space and that kind of, shoulder to shoulder moment, whenever that is, I think that makes it a lot easier.
See, I just learned something. I like that too, being side by
Thanks.
side.
Yeah.
So tell me more. So now, Madison is overcoming, as far as what she's dealing with,
Yeah.
with the disease. Is it actually called a disease or is it illness?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you would call it a disease.
Well, we're not going to
Yeah.
accept that, but yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason being because we're healed, right?
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, I think so. After I was bullied and stuff, I really got into dance, and that was how I kind of dealt with the grief of losing my good friend. And I love dance. Like I called dance was like my first love. You know, it was like, it was eat, sleep, dance all the time. And I loved it so much. You know, it was a really healthy outlet for me to channel all these emotions. And I was, now we're coming into like my teenage years. And this is actually what led to me being on a TV show. So I originally, my dream, as a teenager, was to be able to be a professional dancer. And I was at a really great dance studio. And we worked with choreographers from So You Think You Can Dance. I actually even went to workshops and Twitch taught there,
Wow.
who was just an amazing light in our community. And it's so hard to, what happened and what his family's going through right now. But he was just, I just want to say that he is as amazing as everyone is saying he is. Just such a beautiful, beautiful soul to learn from. And I was in that world. It was awesome. It was so fun. And then I booked this TV show. It was one of the first auditions I ever went on. It was called Backstage. That's how I met Dr. Alfie, actually, because her daughter Morgan watched the show and knew who I was. So that was really cool. And it was interesting because it was almost like one of those divine intervention moments where, like, these two paths crossed and I had to choose which one, because I had been leading up the whole year ready for this big dance competition in New York City. And it took place the exact time I was filming this TV show. So I had to make a choice. And I chose the TV show. And I'm so grateful I did, because it led me to working with all of these amazing creative people, and a really diverse group of people as well, which was really great. And there were directors, writers, producers, actors, and being on set made me realize this calling I had. And I didn't know I loved it until I was there. And that's kind of what has led to where I am presently, where I am. My sisters and I, we just finished writing a screenplay together based on a book that we self-published. And we're in the process of pitching it and working with the producer and getting that show made. And we're going to be playing the three sisters in the show, because it's about three sisters. And that has been just our passion and mission these past couple of years. And it's been so exciting. And I think back to that time of what if I had chosen dance over this opportunity? And as hard as it was, because I was so committed to dance, and that's what I had like blinders on. I think it's important too, to when something like that, this opportunity that maybe we didn't see coming comes, I think it's important to take that opportunity, even if it's unknown and it's kind of scary. Like I hadn't acted before, and that was my first time acting, and I realized how much I enjoyed it. So
Wow.
yeah.
That was your first time. So okay, so let's go back. So now
Yeah.
you've auditioned, and now you're doing acting.
Yeah.
And the only thing I could think, because I can't act, but the only thing I remember, you see the flashback, and it's, take one, take two,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
how long did that process? I mean, once you found out it was a passion,
Yeah.
how long did that process take to really kind of adapt to it and just realize your gift?
That's a really good question. The first year, so I filmed Backstage for 2 years. So the first year, it was like I felt like Bambi. Like I was like, okay, like find your mark, and I just had no idea what I was doing. And I'm so grateful to the directors I worked with, because they were so patient and so amazing to work with, like Warren Sonoda and R.T. Thorne, and Director X. He directed some of Justin Bieber's music videos and Drake's music videos, and Wendy Morgan and Laura Robinson. They were all so lovely to work with, and so patient. I was very grateful for that. And then for the second season, they said, okay, if you take acting lessons, because we see something here in you, if you take acting lessons and sharpen your craft a little bit, we'll have you back for second season. I'm like, of course, sign me up, I'll do it. So I took acting classes. And it's funny, because the second season, I was still learning how to act. Like I had an acting coach, Andrew Musselman, who's amazing. And I was still learning as I was filming. So it was quite I was way out of my comfort zone the whole time. Like I just was not comfortable at all. And I'm very proud of how well I did, especially the second season, considering I was still learning it. And it's only been in the past couple of years that I feel very comfortable in who I am as an actress. And I know what I'm doing, and I feel good about it. And I think a lot of it just comes from life experience too. I started when I was 15, 16, 17. So that was, I didn't have I barely really knew myself, let alone how to act. And I think the process of just, even Andrew Musselman, when I first started acting, he said the key to acting is self-awareness. And I took that with me, and I really took that to heart. And I think it's really true. And the more mentally healthy I've become, the more I know myself, the better I've become as an actor. And even Deepak Chopra, he did this article when I turned 18 years old. I read this article by him, and he said the question to ask yourself in your 20s is to ask yourself, who am I becoming? And he listed all the other questions at each decade of your life. And from 18 till now, that's been my mission of figuring that out. And if I'm not happy with it, changing course and kind of finding ways to become the best version of myself. And a lot of that has just been like a lot of therapy, to be honest, and finding the right therapist and sorting through my past, all the trauma of my past, all the bullying and the health condition and this and that. And it's been amazing. So that has been incredibly helpful for acting, ironically.
And I'll say, and I say it all the time, I don't think this guy actually knows how much of an impact when he said it. So I had the opportunity to be on a panel with Robin Williams' son, Zach Williams. You know,
That's
Robin
amazing.
Williams was the comedian that committed suicide. Actually, one of my favorite comedians.
Same here. Yeah.
And he said, the reason why we like serve so hard or we're passionate about things, he said, because it's our pursuit to our happiness. And I thought about that, you know, even everything that I do, you know, I do a lot of things with passion. And even as I hear you say it, like, you know, even though dance was your first passion, but you discovered something, there was a discovery. And the only thing it made you happy. Like you said, based on everything that you had been through, it made you happy. So that pursuit to that happiness, you know, getting the, you know, really diving into it, to getting the extra acting classes, but yet fulfilling something within your heart that brings about happiness to you to carry on like this career. I mean, like, honestly, I'm so proud of you, even as we speak on this today. And so what is going on presently as well? Not only just that in the book, what else are you doing?
Yeah, so presently we have adapted our book into a screenplay, and we are in the process of making a TV show. So we had to write a pilot, and that took 2 years to figure out how to write the pilot because we were so new to screenwriting. It's very different from writing a book. Writing a book, you know, it's basically like description, dialogue, and setting, basically, or how you write a book. You just got to describe the set, you got to describe things, you got to take in the setting, and you got to have characters and talk to them and talk about their thoughts in their internal world. And when you're writing a script, the actor's bringing that and the cinematographers are bringing that. So with a script, it's about writing as little as possible and getting across as much as possible at the same time, which is really hard. And for any screenwriters who are listening to this or any aspiring writers, what really helped us was reading this book called Save the Cat. And it's really great for just getting like the fundamentals and basics of screenwriting. There's also a book called Story by Robert McKee, which is really great. And all these books are recommended to me by like producers and writers that I had worked with on Backstage. So I was really grateful that I was able to extract that information from them. And I would spend all my time in between time on set, like watching director X direct or watching, you know, the producer behind the scenes, like talk to them on my lunch breaks and try to get a sense of the filmmaking process, not just acting, but what was it like? You know, what does it take to make a really great project? And another great thing that really helped us write a pilot was the Duffer Brothers Masterclass. So, you know, like the Masterclass app, or I guess the website, it's a membership. So you do need to pay, you know, to get it, but it's really worth it. And listening to the Duffer Brothers Masterclass really helped us write our pilot. Like they were so generous with their information and since taking that masterclass and writing another version of the pilot, because we had like 5 different versions, and it was really, really hard to crack a pilot, and that's one of the hardest things to write. Like all screenwriters talk about that, so at least we weren't alone. But we got feedback from like 5 different people in the industry after we wrote this new version of the pilot, and they were like, "You guys have talent, and this is really good." And it was so great because we were getting so much negative feedback up until that point because we were learning. So also just it's really taught us too to not be discouraged by negative feedback, and it just if you can take it and learn from it, you're going to eventually get there and make a really great thing. And that's where we are now. So that feels really good. And we're working with a producer right now to get this show made and to partner. We're gathering the team right now, basically, to make this show.
Nice. Well, so you know what?
Yeah.
Actually, that brings me right into the next question. So, with everything that's going on, uh, your schedule busy. What do you do for self care?
Oh, that's a really good question. Self-care. So I think what's really important for self-care is managing your stress as much as you can. And I know that's a very cliche thing to say because we all are experiencing stress. And I know that some of us experience more stress than others. So I know that this is on a spectrum. For me, what's really helpful is just having a good like getting exercise, get out there, get sunshine as much as you possibly can, get in nature, and find a really great group of friends that you can talk to on a weekly basis at least, because you need a really great support system. And getting enough sleep. Try to get as much quality sleep as you can. And I know that's really hard, and some of us have a hard time, and me too. I mean, I don't have it mastered, but I would recommend that. And therapy, if you can, just find, and I think a big gap, and I know that for the BIPOC community, this is really important too, is
Mhm.
finding the right therapist,
Yes.
finding the right care. So I would say that as well. It's super important.
Yeah. I mean, you listed a lot of things. I know, like I went through the therapy. You were, well, you know, I was a part of Black Man Hill as their
Yes.
director of partnerships. But I'll tell you another thing that I discovered even after therapy is called the 8 dimensions of wellness.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
and that really blessed me. I find myself, actually, I'm going to start doing coaching with it
That's
because
awesome.
I think it's like a preliminary before therapy because
Mm,
it goes into your physical, talks about your finances, it talk about your intellect, talk about the occupational, your work, the spiritual, the social, the environmental, and then the
mm,
emotional. But I think it gave me a great framework because a lot of people, we know a lot of people are not going to go to therapy. Like therapy is
yeah.
a buzzword now. Mental
Yeah.
health is a buzzword, but in all actuality, everybody's been dealing with it for years, but now we're expressing it. But
Mm,
it actually gave a framework as far as a introductory phase before therapy, because I think it
that's
is so
great.
important. Because you know when you get into therapy, you got to dive in. You
Yes.
got to actually start revealing those. You know, you mentioned scars. You got to start taking
Hmm.
those band-aids off those scars and possibly opening some of those wounds up. And everybody can't do that. And you made another very important point in finding the right therapist. You know, because even I think, like you said, even in the BIPOC communities, we talk about cultural competency, but I think even more important especially when you start talking about a therapist and them understanding you, there's a
Mm,
sensitivity that they have to have in understanding you.
yes.
Which makes a big, for you to open up and feel safe and feel that security to open
Yeah.
up because you're actually turning over your life to them. They're
Yes.
they're hearing all these dark secrets that nobody has heard before. And
Yeah.
I think that plays a vital role. So thank you for actually telling us like some of the things that you do for
Oh,
self care. Because I know that the nature's a big one because I know you love snow, right?
I
But
love yeah, you know what, being a Canadian, I don't love snow.
oh,
I would take a sunset and water any day. You know, Miami, we were talking about Miami before recording. I'll take that over snow any day.
so you got the screenplay that's coming up.
Yeah.
What are some more of your plans for the future?
Yeah, I think eventually the ideal for my future would be able to produce, direct, write, act in whatever I want and be able to make really great stories and quality storytelling and have that be an inclusive thing too, like have a diverse cast of amazing actors, writers, producers, directors, and also continue with Team. I work with a mental health nonprofit called Team, which is short for Teaching Everyone About Mental Health.
Okay.
And I've been working with them for the past 5 years, and I've learned so much about mental health working with them. And it was founded by Mackenzie Drazen. She's a Forbes 30 under 30, and
Mm.
she's one of my sponsors and mental health mentors amongst Dr. Alfie and also Dr. Alex Korb, who wrote the Upward
Yes.
Spiral workbook. And yeah, I've learned so much from her and working at Team. And I just want to continue to raise awareness about Team and grow their following on
Yeah.
Instagram. Like I'm part of the social media coordination on that. And just continue to raise awareness and end the stigma around mental illness and help people get quality mental health care, because I've experienced it firsthand and I know how important it is. And I mean, and Dr. Alfie too, like her work is amazing and I'm so inspired by her and she's doing so many good things. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's how we actually connected, because you said
Yeah.
you overheard. I think, what were we talking about? Well, actually, we're talking about suicide. I think suicide
Yes.
within the
Dr.
communities.
Yes,
Yeah,
Dr. Alfie held, I think it was during the pandemic still. It was this big
yeah,
Zoom event.
yeah, yeah,
And you were one of the panelists on
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. And you said you were blessed by the conversation, and some of my
Yes.
background coming out. I come from a very diverse co- uh,
Mm-hmm.
background with lived experiences, and working in the prison for like I said, 25 years,
Yes.
and I know some of that even sparked some of your attention as far as the prison system.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend about this and we were talking about how she knew someone who had worked in the prison system as well, and they were saying how there's no follow-up care for mental health and how that's just crazy and it's a huge gap. And and so I wanted to ask you about how do you close that gap? What's being done to change that? And what are your thoughts on all of
Yeah. So once again, great question.
that?
The thing that I really discovered about, especially inside a institution, is, first of all, there's no adequate care for mental health. The prison that I worked in, not naming any prisons, but there wasn't enough psychologists or therapists or social workers to even handle the amount of individuals that were incarcerated. Because you can only imagine someone being incarcerated, how they're being affected mentally. Uh, so I think that's part of it. But even if they did, they got the care. What should happen once they make that transition? I really don't think there's nothing that's afforded to them. Maybe that's something that we can start, because I know for a fact there's nothing, and that's why you have so many different organizations. When it comes to like Reform Alliance, you got some other organizations that are helping individuals once they come out, as
Mm,
far as getting jobs and getting opportunity. Even when I told you, I left out of Detroit from doing a speaking engagement, uh, and the young lady talked about post traumatic prison disorder.
mm,
Yeah, Shawana, she talked about, and same thing. I thought about that too, because you don't hear enough being spoken about it. We hear about people's transition,
yeah.
when everybody's happy, and some people, they do that transition, but how did it really affect them mentally? A lot of people don't know. Even for me, like even in the military, I suffered from PTSD. I was
Of
involved.
course.
I
Yeah.
was involved in a bombing. Everybody
Wow.
thinks on the outside, everything, hey, you look good. Every time I see you, you're smiling, but nobody knows about those dark moments. Nobody knows
Yeah.
about that time at night, or when you start having dreams, or you start, your mind starts to wander. Nobody knows about that. So to go back to your question, I don't think there's enough adequate care being done, and I don't think, and I could be wrong, I don't think that people are really addressing that issue, and I think it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I don't know what it is that people can do. And I was talking to about my friend who's also in mental health care. And it is, I agree with you 100%. And I hope that I don't know enough to come up with any solutions, but I do care about the fact that people need quality care, regardless of what your background is or where you've come from. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I really, I told you I had a couple questions, a challenge, but I didn't write them down. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask a couple questions off the top.
All right.
Um, what, and we'll break it down. What male
Okay.
actor would you love to work with?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the person that comes to mind would probably be Timothy Chalamet, and I know most girls are probably going to say that, but it's not for the reason you think. Um, I think he was. I watched Call Me by Your Name when I was 18 years old in a theater, and it just blew me away, his performance, and it inspired me to become a better actor myself. And I really, I mean, what I know about him, it seems like he conducts himself really well on set, and seems to have a really great reputation. And I would just love to learn from him, like just be on set and see what he does, because I think he's a phenomenal actor, and I just like to learn, just to watch and learn by working with him. So probably Timothy Chalamet.
Okay. What female actress?
Oh, I have so many, but
I don't want to get you in trouble. Somebody listen to this podcast.
yeah. Zendaya for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Zendaya is an absolute queen of our generation, and she's just, I'm so inspired by her, not only as an actress, but just as a person. Like, she just seems absolutely amazing, and I'd love to be in her presence and learn what it's like to be in her presence, and what kind of things that she does that makes her have such a beautiful impact on people. So just to learn, really, I mean, they're such role models to me. So yeah.
I'll turn this into a two-part. Currently, favorite TV show.
Ooh, favorite TV show. Well, I don't have a favorite, but I do have a current TV show I'm watching that I think is really cool. Narcos Mexico, I'm watching right now. Okay. And it's really good. Like, it's funny because Ava and Elle and I, my sisters, and writing partners. It's funny being a writer, because watching TV is actually productive. Like, we actually learn by watching television. I think it gets a bad rap, but it's really cool to learn how, like, for Narcos Mexico, they weave in a bit more humor into the show, and it is very serious subject matter, but it does make it feel a bit more realistic. Like, there's kind of funny moments, and it kind of takes away this seriousness and brings kind of a realistic feeling to it that I really like. And every TV show Ava and I have watched, we've learned something from, in every movie. So it's really cool. It's, whether it's the cinematography or the writing or what the actors did, there's always something that we take away and learn from and try to apply to our current projects or future projects. So yeah.
Favorite movie?
Oh man. So many favorite movies. I'm gonna say a few favorite movies, just because they're a combination of what's inspired our show currently.
Okay.
Little Women, I really loved. Greta Gerwig is a huge inspiration to me as a writer actress, and I just felt very seen watching that movie because it was sisters. It was a bunch of sisters, and it was like me and my sisters. And their dynamic really inspired how we are pitching our show right now and putting it together. Call Me by Your Name was amazing. Cinematography was fantastic. Acting was amazing. It was just a masterpiece, in my opinion. And I think growing up, I watched this movie called The Secret Garden that was about this group of young kids. One girl was an orphan, one boy was in a wheelchair, and another boy, they all kind of lived together. And this girl was really sad and serious and depressed, and these boys that she hung out with kind of brought out this spirit in her that she had lost. And as a young girl, like I was like 3 or 4 watching this, and I just watch it on repeat all the time. And it was quite a serious movie, and I think I kind of identified with that female character of just being this really young kid who had been struck by this kind of tragic situation in a way, being born with a health condition and stuff. And it was a really beautiful story, and that I think probably got my storytelling kind of journey going probably with that movie. I think it very much inspired me, and The Prince of Egypt as well. That was an amazing animated movie. I love that movie too. I could go on and on. I'm starting to go on a bit, but
yeah, no. So the last one, we'll leave it here. Favorite childhood book?
Ooh, favorite childhood book. The one that comes to mind is The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. I think Jeanette Walls is her last name. And I really liked that book. It was really cool. It was a memoir, and it was about her family and how they were a glass castle. On the outside, everything looked normal, but on the inside, a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of crazy stuff going on, and how she survived it. And I really love reading about memoirs and how people have gone through really difficult things and come out the other side. When I was little, I was just obsessed with reading books about the Holocaust and how these young children survived. And yeah, so those are probably my favorite books growing up.
Well, you did good. I was, like I said, that was part of my little Let's Go challenge, and I
Thanks.
really appreciate it. So, I mean, tell us how we can follow you. Tell us, what to look out for that's coming up next.
Yeah, thanks. So on Instagram, you can follow me at Madison McGregor, and McGregor is MAC, not MC like the boxer, Conor McGregor, but MAC, Madison McGregor. On it, I actually get those questions sometimes. People are like, "Is Conor McGregor your dad?" And I'm like, "It's MAC, not MC." Um, but yeah, so Madison McGregor on Instagram, and coming up, if all goes to plan, hopefully next year, the year after, my sisters and I's show will be on a streaming service near you at some point.
Wow.
So
Well, I expect to be on set just to be able to see
yeah, yeah.
it.
I mean, if all goes to plan, we'll be filming in Europe somewhere. So I mean,
Nice.
you're more than welcome
Yeah.
somewhere in Europe.
I love Frankfurt. I spent a few
Oh,
years over there.
cool!
Yeah. So
Wow.
now, well, thank you. And then, how we end is, I'll just say this has been the Let's Go show with Doug Reed with Madison McGregor. You know what I say? Let's go, baby. Peace.
Let's
I'm
go,
out.
baby.
All right. Thank you.